All right, welcome everybody to Keeping It Real with Nicole, all things real estate. And today I have with me Josh Mellin, home inspector. Welcome, Josh.
Thank you, Nicole.
So, a home inspection really to make sure your buyers aren't picking up someone else's headache. It's kind of how I think it. And I always recommend my clients not to skip it. The only people that skip it typically are my investors who are going to flip a home. They know what they're getting into. So, can you speak in addition to that of why a home buyer wants to hire a home inspector, I should say?
Sure. Well, I kind of compare it to, if you're buying a used car, it kind of makes sense to have a mechanic look at it before you purchase it, just to make sure, like you said, you're not getting someone else's headaches. But we know with the house, it's even more expensive of a purchase and possibly the biggest expense you'll ever have in your life.
Typically it is,
So,
yes.
I've been there before buying a house, knowing like once you find the house you like, you tend to overlook things. So, and sometimes especially if you're a newer home buyer, you may not know what to look for. So it's good to get another set of eyes on it. Someone who's not, invested in the house and just, taking a look at the components to find if there's any issues and if there's any, major issues that either could be addressed or maybe make sense to maybe this isn't the correct house for
Right,
you.
looking
So,
for those big ticket items.
correct.
Foundation, roof, things that are going to really smack you once you buy the house.
Exactly. Yep.
So typically the most popular is the general home, but
Yes.
there's a variety of there's mold, there's radon, water potability, septic. What other types of inspections do you handle yourself?
Yeah. So obviously the general home inspection. I also do radon testing, and I'm licensed through Ohio to do wood destroying insect inspections. Some people call them pest inspections or termite inspections. So I can do those as well, and I can do water potability. I can do that testing. I don't do septic inspections, but I have several contacts that I can always recommend if a client specifically needs that. In addition to that, mold as well. I can typically identify if there's a concern for mold. I just can't say for sure if it is or not. So I have someone I'm connected with that I can always put the client in touch with them as well.
Okay.
Typically, with the home inspection, additional inspections may be recommended after the home inspection. So it doesn't always make sense to have the mold person and all these people come in during the home inspection because it may not be necessary.
Right.
But the client typically has within a week or so after the general home inspection, if there are any of those additional inspections or, contractors need to come out, they have that option to make that happen before deciding if they want to go through with the house or not.
So on my contracts, I use 7 days, 7 to 10 max for a home inspection. So that's why you almost need to hire a home inspector right out of the gate.
Correct.
Get you in there, and then if there's anything else needed to secure all the inspections and results prior to the termination of that timeline, and then you have to either release the inspection contingency for the home inspection or walk away.
Right.
Okay. So should the homeowner be present for the home inspection?
The homeowner, I prefer not to be there, but the buyer definitely should be there. Sometimes it's helpful when the homeowner is there. It's hit or miss because sometimes questions come up that I may not be able to figure out. So if the homeowner is there, we can ask those questions, but sometimes they tend to be kind of in the way and trying to help point out things that aren't a big deal. But the buyer should definitely be there. I think it's definitely helpful. I like it when the buyer's there, and I always tell buyers they're welcome to follow me around and ask questions, or they can take the time to check the house out more. When the buyer is next to me asking questions, it tends to take a little bit longer for the inspection, but the buyer gets a lot more out of the inspection that way.
Right.
And there's things that it's easier for me to talk through some things than to try and type everything out in the report. So we can kind of talk through and there might be something that's not really a big concern, but if we talk through it, they can decide how big of a concern it is to them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Prior to receiving that lengthy 75-page report.
Exactly. Yes.
I always tell the buyers, just be prepared. It's going to be 75 pages. It's supposed to be.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I like to tell people, the inspection does tend to be a negative experience because I'm here to point all the bad things out about the house they fell in love with. But it's kind of good to have all that information to know, what should be addressed immediately, what can be addressed maybe down the road. And, like I said, we can kind of talk through that when they're there.
One thing that's happened a couple times to me is I always, as a realtor, make sure that the gas is on. And still I've come for the inspection, gas is off. So do you run into that quite a bit or just once in a while?
It happens more than I'd like it to.
Obviously, you can't check the furnace without the gas on.
Correct, yes. When the house is vacant, I try to do my best to make sure all the utilities are on, gas, water, electrical, because especially in the wintertime, a lot of times people will turn the water off if the house is vacant to avoid the pipes from freezing. So I like to make sure all those utilities are on so I can give my client a full inspection. Okay. Obviously, like you said, I can't inspect the furnace or possibly hot water tank if the gas is off. If the water's off, there's several things I can't inspect.
So if you come upon it, do you have to return? Do you return, or is there a fee to return?
Yeah, I mean, it's not partially it's on me if it's not on because I didn't ask the question. I never charge the client because it's not their fault that the utilities are not on. Because a lot of times when they look at the house, they may know the power's on, but they're not running the furnace or anything like that. So I don't charge an additional fee to go out. I just try to avoid those situations whenever I can.
Right. So what kind of things have you come upon as a home inspector that would really just kill the deal?
Well, it all depends on the client, to be honest. I mean, to me, the biggest thing that could potentially kill a deal will be foundational concerns, because even if you have a structural engineer look at those items, they may not be able to fully assess what's going on and could turn into more money down the road. I mean, if you're looking at a roof that needs to be replaced, you can get estimates and kind of get a definite number how much that's going to cost. Same thing with a furnace or, things that are, high ticket items, but you can get a definite number. The structural concerns, those are the things that kind of make me a little nervous and could potentially become a deal killer. But I mean, I've had clients where I've been nervous to tell them certain things and they're just like, oh, it's no problem. I have a family full of contractors and we can get those things addressed.
Lucky.
So, exactly. Yeah. So every client's different and kind of what their bigger concerns are varies.
What about when I go in and I see Federal Pacific panel? That always raises a red flag to me. What is your thought on that?
For me too. I mean, kind of the guidance I've been given by an electrician that I'm close with is specifically the Federal Pacific panels with the red tabbed breakers.
Right.
If the breakers are white tabbed, they're not as dangerous, but I still call it out as a concern and recommend having an electrician take a look at it just to make sure everything's safe, for the buyer.
Yeah, it's almost, I can't even think of a time it wasn't flagged when we came upon a Federal Pacific panel. And then you need the new panel, which is $2,000 or something like that.
Potentially.
Yeah. The other electrical thing that comes up a lot, especially in our area, is knob and tube.
Correct. Yes.
So I always tell them, if knob and tube caused a fire every day, every house around us would have been burned down already. But what is the safety concern with the knob and tube?
Well, basically houses built in the early 1970s or before have the potential for knob and tube wiring. Knob and tube, the biggest thing is it's not grounded like current wiring is. And, some of the safety concerns, other safety concerns are it's older wiring. The insulation isn't as good as it is now. And over time that insulation can get deteriorate or, get destroyed. And then you might have, wires potentially exposed, potentially coming in contact with insulation or something like that. Also, another concern with it is if it's left untouched is not as a concern, but if you splice into it, that can create some problems as well.
With the new panel and the old knob and tube.
Yeah. Yeah. Or if, it's not uncommon for older homes to have one outlet in a bedroom, which by today's standard is just crazy. So
every 10 feet, I think.
Right. So you want to, if you add additional outlets or something like that and you splice into it or add light fixtures or anything like that, that can create, overheating of the wiring and create some problems.
Is your recommendation to just put it on the list for maybe a future replacement?
Yeah, I mean, it's there's always a lot of things I can't see with the wiring because a lot of it's in the walls. So, I mean, I can't, sometimes you might find bigger concerns after, remodeling and you're taking walls out. If I see concerns on the wiring that I can see, I definitely would recommend have an electrician take a look at it and make any repairs if needed. But yeah, I mean, ideally it would be to replace the wiring in the house, but most people aren't going to do that. So another option could be if you have knob and tube wiring, for example, if you have outlets that are not grounded, you should have two-pronged outlets installed. So that way when you go to plug something in, you know for a fact that that's whether it's grounded or not.
Or you see the 3-prong outlets that are just a dummy prong.
Exactly. Yeah.
You're identifying that as well.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. So you come into the home, you do the home inspection, you're working with the buyers, you go home. How long does it take to return that report back to the client?
I always do my best to get the report back to the client within 24 hours
Nice.
for the general home inspection, because typically there's only a few days for the client to look over everything and then kind of make their decision or request any possible repairs or anything. So if I get it to them within 24 hours, then it kind of gives them time to kind of go through it. Typically, I'm assuming your clients, a lot of times you'll kind of go through it as well.
Yes.
I always email it to the client and to Nicole, and that way, she might identify things or you might identify things that the client may not necessarily realize is a big concern.
They also come with questions, so it's easier that I've reviewed it and I have it in front of me.
For sure, yeah. And I'm always available as well after, I email the report, because like you said, it can be overwhelming, 75, 80 pages. It can be overwhelming and kind of hard to, make sense out of. So I try and make it as understandable as I can. There's pictures in there. There's descriptions with the pictures so they kind of know what they're looking at. I try to identify bigger concerns compared to some of the concerns that aren't necessarily a big deal today.
Safety first, marked in red.
Yep, safety and any major concerns like that. Yep.
I like the book that you leave with the client when you leave. You want to talk about that book? It's a nice little thank you for your service.
Yeah. It's the book is called Now That You've Had a Home Inspection, and basically there's pictures in there, and it's pretty good sized book that just talks about how the home was constructed. It tells the client different maintenance things to do and what time of year they should do those things. And in the very back, there's a chart where they can keep track of things. So when appliances are replaced, I tell them, stick receipts in there too. You can kind of keep things all together. Because, as a homeowner, the years kind of fly by.
They do.
And someone asks you, when did you replace the roof? And you think, I think it was only 5 years ago. And that was maybe 10 years ago, because you kind of lose track easily. So it's kind of good to keep track of those things.
And you never know when the opportunity is going to knock and you're going to sell that home.
Exactly.
So it's nice to have that.
Exactly.
Going back slightly, I wanted to talk about the difference between a home inspection and a condo inspection.
Sure. So with a condo, typically every condo association has a little bit different, guidelines, but a lot of times with the condos, the condo association covers the roof and anything on the exterior.
The siding.
Yes, exactly. So I still look at those things for the client just to kind of point anything out that they may need to address with the condo association. Mm-hmm. So, any concerns I might see there. But it's not as thorough on the exterior as a home inspection would be,
right?
For a single family home or multifamily home. I do condo inspections regularly. The interior is just as thorough as a home inspection for a single family home.
So the roof, anything 50% of the wall out belongs to the condo inspection, and everything on the inside belongs to the home buyer. If there is a furnace in the unit with the AC, even though it's sitting outside, that's on the home buyer.
Correct.
If the furnace or boiler is maintained by the association outside of the unit, that's on the home association.
Correct.
So that's a little differentiation.
Yep. And sometimes I will still take a look at those things if I can access them.
Okay.
If it's a condo building, sometimes those areas aren't accessible
Right.
during the home inspection, or sometimes AC units are on the roof and I can't get up to the roof because of, no access. But so anything I'm able to help them with, I will. Again, just to point out if there's any concerns that they should address, even if it's not on them, just any concerns they should bring up to the condo association.
Okay. So a cash buyer, a flipper, that's the only time really I see home inspections. You're like, okay, skip it, whatever. You're going to fix it. But FHA, VA, conventional loan, USDA, all of those, you want to have one. So can you talk a little bit about the difference between an FHA inspection as compared to a general home inspection with a conventional loan?
Yeah, so I mean, my inspection process is very similar. I mean, I still will inspect, my typical inspection is I start on the exterior and kind of look at as much as I can outside, the roof, the siding, the windows, garage, if there is one. And then once I'm in the home, I start in the basement, kind of work my way up. I'll inspect the appliances, if there are any, the furnace, air conditioner, hot water tank. I look at all those things. So the inspection is very similar for all of those types of loans. However, with an FHA loan or a VA loan, the appraisal tends to happen after I do my inspection.
Correct.
And there might be certain things that those appraisers look for that need to be addressed before the loan can be approved because they have more strict guidelines. So I try and do my best to point those things out in effort to hopefully, bring those things up to the seller to try and get those things, done before the appraisal, because we don't need the buyer paying for multiple appraisals.
And that's what happens.
Yeah.
So you're looking for FHA, for example, peeling paint.
Mm-hmm.
What else?
Missing handrails.
Missing siding.
Yep. Cement is a big thing. If there's any trip hazards, in the driveway or on the sidewalks, if the cement's uneven anywhere. So yeah, they do focus a lot on safety. With those types of loans.
And those are going to be requirements paid for by the seller to clear the FHA appraisal.
Correct. Yep.
So it's easier to identify it and say, hey, this is going to come up. Can we get this taken care of now before we pay, $600 for an appraisal?
Right. Yep.
And then they come out. If they have to come back, it's another $200.
Right.
So it's a substantial, it's like 30%. So are you bonded and insured?
Yes, I do carry insurance, general liability, and errors and omissions insurance. So yes, I am insured.
Excellent. Okay. And what type of education did you need to become a home inspector?
So I mean, I before this, I worked for a self-storage company.
Okay.
And I was a district manager, so I oversaw multiple properties. And I was when I went to properties, I was looking at a lot of these things that I look at now. And so, life, helps with that, and, just kind of picking things up as I went. My dad was always pretty handy, so I knew a lot about construction. But as far as schooling, it might be a little bit different now, but I went to a school in Canton that was taught by someone who was a home inspector for 25 years.
Okay.
So I did that. And now at the time when I became a home inspector 8 years ago, you didn't have to be licensed in the state of Ohio, which was kind of scary, honestly. But over the past few years, they've required a license, licensing. So I think the process is slightly different now. I mean, there's some testing you have to take, and a little bit possibly, more testing you have to take to actually officially get licensed.
Okay.
But yeah, the school was definitely, there's different schools out there, but the one in Canton was very, very helpful.
Do you need to do continuing ed type stuff?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's a couple of organizations for home inspectors. The two bigger ones are ASHI and InterNACHI, and I'm a member of InterNACHI.
Okay.
So through that membership, I follow kind of their guidelines for the home inspection, and I also have continuing education that I can do through them online where I can gain hours. And then for the license, you're required to do so many hours of continuing education I think it's every 2 or 3 years.
We have the same every 3 years. There's a
Yeah.
requirement. It's a pretty hefty one, too.
Yeah.
So what was the worst home inspection you've ever done?
Well, there's a lot of interesting stories, which I'm sure we could talk for a while. But one that kind of sticks out, I believe the house, it was on the west side of Cleveland. I want to say maybe North Olmsted. Sometimes I do inspections of houses that are foreclosed.
Okay.
And this particular house was foreclosed. And one of the concerns when a house is foreclosed is the utilities get shut off. And I'm not sure if this house did have a sump pump or not.
Oh, no.
But when I went to go into the basement, there was standing water completely throughout the basement. It was 6 inches below my feet, and when I was standing on the main level, it was all the way up
Oh, my
to the
goodness.
floor joists in the basement. and the basement steps were actually floating in the water. So I could not even attempt to access the basement to know what
Furnace
was going on.
underwater,
Everything.
hot water tank underwater.
Electrical panel.
Oh,
Yeah, all of that stuff.
hoping it was grounded.
For sure. Yeah. So that one was definitely and then because of the standing water, however long it had been there, there was mold, looked like mold throughout most of the house. And yeah, so it was definitely a little scary.
My son worked for PuroClean for a while in the summers, and he came upon that more than once, where it was the septic backing up into the basement.
Oh, geez.
Yeah, and they didn't know it, and it was 2 feet deep.
Yeah.
Blah.
Yeah. Not good.
Okay. Well, I will say one thing that I like watching you do a home inspection. My policy is if the home is vacant, I don't mind having you just go, but typically, I always go.
Right.
If the home is not vacant, I definitely go because I just think it's a protection for you as well that nobody's going to say something went missing,
Exactly.
But I like to be there, and I like for the clients to be there, and I like the way that you talk them through it. And, I do work with a lot of new home buyers, so they have lots and lots of questions. I think you do a nice job handling that, so thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate
All
that.
right. Well, thank you for your time, and I appreciate it. We'll be giving you some more referrals.
Sounds great. Well, I appreciate working with you, Nicole.
Thank you.